There's a certain thrill in the unknown, a rush that comes from meeting a stranger for the first time. Craigslist was built on that thrill, a digital marketplace where you could find anything, from a used couch to a new roommate, from a job to a date. But behind every listing, every anonymous email, every promise of a good deal, there's a risk. Most people walk away with nothing more than a story to tell. But sometimes, the story doesn't end with a handshake or a simple exchange. Sometimes it ends in disaster. The first story begins in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. A college student named Rachel was looking for a cheap car. She'd saved up for months, scrolling through endless ads, hoping to find something reliable. One night, she found it, a silver sedan, low mileage, listed for half the price of anything else she'd seen. The seller's message was short and to the point. Need to sell fast. Cash only. Meet tonight. Rachel hesitated, but the deal was too good to pass up. She texted the number, and the seller replied almost instantly, giving her an address on the edge of town. It was late, but she convinced herself it was safe. She told her roommate where she was going, just in case, and drove out to the address. The street was dark, lined with empty lots and half-built houses. The car was there, parked under a flickering streetlight, just like in the photos. A man stepped out of the shadows, waving her over. He was older than she expected, his face hidden by a baseball cap. He barely spoke, just handed her the keys and told her to take a look. Rachel walked around the car, trying to act confident, but something felt off. The man kept glancing over his shoulder, shifting from foot to foot. She opened the driver's door, and that's when she saw it. A wallet on the seat, open to a driver's license with a different name than the one he'd given her. She looked up, and the man was suddenly much closer, his hand reaching for her arm. Rachel's instincts kicked in. She dropped the keys, slammed the door, and ran back to her own car. The man shouted after her, but she didn't look back. She sped home, heart pounding, and called the police. They found the car abandoned the next day, the wallet gone, and the seller's number disconnected. Rachel never found out who the man was or what he really wanted, but she learned that sometimes the best deal is the one you walk away from. The second story is about trust and how easily it can be broken. Mark was moving to a new city for work, and he needed a place to stay. Craigslist was full of listings, rooms for rent, apartments, even whole houses. He found one that seemed perfect, a furnished room in a nice neighborhood, cheap rent, and a friendly-sounding roommate named Tom. They exchanged a few emails, and Tom invited Mark to come see the place. When Mark arrived, Tom greeted him at the door with a big smile. The house was clean, the room was nice, and Tom seemed normal, maybe a little too eager, but Mark chalked it up to nerves. They chatted for a while, and Tom offered him a beer. Mark accepted, wanting to be polite. They talked about work, about the city, and about life. But as the night went on, Mark started to feel strange, dizzy, and disoriented, like he was underwater. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Tom's smile faded, replaced by something cold and calculating. Mark realized, too late, that he'd been drugged. He tried to reach for his phone, but Tom grabbed his arm, whispering that everything would be fine, that he just needed to rest. Mark fought to stay awake, but the world went black. He woke up hours later, alone in the room, his head pounding. His wallet and phone were gone. The house was empty, and Tom was nowhere to be found. Mark stumbled outside and flagged down a neighbor who called the police. The house had been rented under a fake name. The listing deleted, the trail cold. Mark got his belongings back eventually, but the sense of violation never left. He moved into a real apartment with real roommates and never used Craigslist again. The third story is about desperation and how it can make us ignore our instincts. A single mother named Lisa was struggling to make ends meet. She found a job listing on Craigslist. Work from home, flexible hours, great pay. It sounded perfect. She emailed the contact, a woman named Sandy, who replied right away. The job was simple, Sandy said. Just receive packages at home and forward them to another address. Lisa would be paid for each package, no questions asked. It seemed too good to be true, but Lisa needed the money. She agreed, and soon boxes started arriving, electronics, clothes, even jewelry. She repackaged them and sent them off, as instructed. The money came in, just like Sandy promised. But after a few weeks, Lisa got a visit from the police. The packages, it turned out, were stolen goods, part of a larger fraud operation. Lisa was caught in the middle, facing charges for a crime she didn't even understand. She lost her job, her savings, and almost lost custody of her child. Sandy disappeared, her email bouncing back as undeliverable. Lisa's story is a warning. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Craigslist is full of opportunities, but not all of them are what they seem. The fourth story is about fear and how it can follow you home. A young couple, Ben and Mia, were looking for furniture for their new apartment. They found a beautiful antique dresser on Craigslist, listed for a fraction of its value. The seller, an older woman named Mrs. Green, invited them to her house to pick it up. The house was old, filled with strange knickknacks and the smell of dust. Mrs. Green was friendly, but there was something unsettling about her. Her eyes never seemed to blink, and she spoke in a slow, deliberate way. Ben and Mia loaded the dresser into their car and drove home. That night, strange things started happening. Doors creaked open by themselves. Cold drafts swept through the apartment, and they both had nightmares about the dresser. Mia woke up to find scratches on her arms, as if she'd been grabbed in her sleep. Ben heard whispers coming from the dresser, voices he couldn't understand. They tried to ignore it, but the activity only got worse. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered, and the air grew heavy with a sense of dread. Finally, they decided to get rid of the dresser. They left it on the curb, but the next morning, it was back in their apartment, sitting in the exact same spot. Terrified, they called a local priest, who blessed the apartment and the dresser. After that, the activity stopped, but Ben and Mia never bought anything secondhand again. The fifth and final story is about the dangers of anonymity. A man named Chris was selling his old gaming console on Craigslist. He arranged to meet the buyer in a public place, a busy parking lot in the middle of the day. The buyer showed up, cash in hand, and the exchange went smoothly. But as Chris was walking back to his car, he was approached by two men who claimed to be undercover police officers. They flashed badges and demanded to see the console, saying it had been reported stolen. Chris, confused and intimidated, handed over the console. The men took it, got into their car, and drove away. When Chris called the police to report the incident, he learned that no officers had been sent to the area. The men were scammers, using fake badges to steal from unsuspecting sellers. Chris never got his console back, and the men were never caught. Craigslist is a place where anything can happen. For every successful transaction, there's a story like these. Stories of trust broken, instincts ignored, and deals that end in disaster. The next time you find yourself scrolling through listings, remember, sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you're buying or selling. It's the person on the other side of the screen. Sometimes, the most terrifying part of these stories isn't the scam or the loss. It's the realization that danger can hide behind the most ordinary moments. Craigslist is supposed to be a place for opportunity, for bargains, for new beginnings. But for the people in these stories, it became a portal to something much darker, a reminder that the line between everyday life and disaster is thinner than we think. After Chris's encounter with the fake police, he found himself questioning everyone he met online. He started to notice how easy it was for someone to create a convincing profile, to use a fake name, and to disappear without a trace. He wondered how many other people had been fooled, how many other stories had ended the same way. The experience left him wary, suspicious, and a little more isolated. He still uses online marketplaces, but he insists on meeting in well-lit, public places, and he never goes alone. Rachel, the college student who almost bought the silver sedan, found herself haunted by what could have happened. She replayed the night over and over in her mind, imagining all the ways it could have gone wrong. She realized how close she'd come to becoming another statistic, another missing person, another unsolved case. The fear stayed with her, a shadow that followed her into every new situation. She became more cautious, more skeptical, and more grateful for the instincts that told her to run. Mark, who was drugged by his would-be roommate, struggled to trust people again. He found himself second-guessing every interaction, wondering if the person on the other end of the email was who they claimed to be. He joined online forums, reading stories from others who had been scammed or worse. Not only that, but he realized that he wasn't alone, that there were thousands of people with stories just like his. The sense of community helped, but the fear never fully went away. He learned to trust his gut, to ask more questions, and to walk away when something didn't feel right. Lisa, caught in the middle of a fraud operation, faced consequences that went far beyond losing money. She spent months clearing her name, explaining to friends and family what had happened. She felt ashamed, embarrassed, and angry at herself for being so trusting. But she also realized how easy it was to fall into a trap, how desperation can cloud your judgment, and how a simple email can change your life forever. She became an advocate for online safety, sharing her story to warn others about the dangers of too-good-to-be-true offers. Ben and Mia, haunted by the cursed dresser, found themselves questioning the reality of what they'd experienced. They tried to rationalize the events. Maybe it was stress, maybe it was coincidence, maybe it was just their imaginations running wild. But the fear was real, the scratches were real, and the sense of dread was real. They started researching haunted objects, reading about other people who had brought home more than they bargained for. They learned that sometimes the past clings to things, that memories and emotions can linger long after the original owner is gone. Furthermore, they moved to a new apartment, leaving the dresser behind, but the experience changed the way they looked at the world. What ties all these stories together isn't just Craigslist. It's the vulnerability that comes with reaching out to strangers. It's the hope that you'll find what you're looking for and the fear that you'll find something you never expected. It's the realization that, in the digital age, danger doesn't always look like a masked intruder or a dark alley. Sometimes, it looks like a friendly email, a good deal, or a simple request to meet in person. The internet has made our lives easier in so many ways, but it's also made it easier for people to hide, to deceive, and to prey on the unsuspecting. He learned to trust his gut, to ask more questions, and to walk away when something didn't feel right. Lisa, caught in the middle of a fraud operation, faced consequences that went far beyond losing money. She spent months clearing her name, explaining to friends and family what had happened. She felt ashamed, embarrassed, and angry at herself for being so trusting. But she also realized how easy it was to fall into a trap, how desperation can cloud your judgment, and how a simple email can change your life forever. She became an advocate for online safety, sharing her story to warn others about the dangers of too-good-to-be-true offers. Ben and Mia, haunted by the cursed dresser, found themselves questioning the reality of what they'd experienced. They tried to rationalize the events. Maybe it was stress, maybe it was coincidence, maybe it was just their imaginations running wild. But the fear was real, the scratches were real, and the sense of dread was real. They started researching haunted objects, reading about other people who had brought home more than they bargained for. They learned that sometimes the past clings to things, that memories and emotions can linger long after the original owner is gone. Furthermore, they moved to a new apartment, leaving the dresser behind. but the experience changed the way they looked at the world. What ties all these stories together isn't just Craigslist. It's the vulnerability that comes with reaching out to strangers. It's the hope that you'll find what you're looking for and the fear that you'll find something you never expected. It's the realization that, in the digital age, danger doesn't always look like a masked intruder or a dark alley. Sometimes, it looks like a friendly email, a good deal, or a simple request to meet in person. The internet has made our lives easier in so many ways, but it's also made it easier for people to hide, to deceive, and to prey on the unsuspecting. Every transaction, every message, and every meeting is a leap of faith. Most of the time, it works out fine, but when it doesn't, the consequences can be devastating. If you're listening to these stories and thinking, that could never happen to me, remember that everyone in these stories thought the same thing. They were careful, they took precautions, and they trusted their instincts. But sometimes, that's not enough. Sometimes, the danger is invisible until it's too late. So what can you do? Be cautious. Meet in public places. Bring a friend. Trust your gut. If something feels off, walk away. No deal is worth risking your safety. And remember, you're not alone. There are millions of people using Craigslist and other online marketplaces every day. Most of them are just like you, looking for a bargain, a job, or a new start. But a few are looking for something else. The next time you scroll through listings, remember these stories. Remember that behind every ad, there's a person with their own motives, their own secrets, and their own potential for danger. The internet is a powerful tool, but it's also a place where the rules of the real world don't always apply. If you've ever had a scary Craigslist encounter, you know how quickly things can go from normal to terrifying. Maybe you met someone who seemed nice, but turned out to be something else. Maybe you bought something that came with more than you bargained for. Maybe you trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Whatever your story, you're not alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey through 5 of the scariest Craigslist encounters that ended in disaster. If you have a story of your own, a moment when a simple transaction turned into a nightmare, share it in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it, who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that could happen to any of us.